the men happened to be men who were up on their responsibilities to the synagogue. Responsibilities, not carrying out the trash, not cutting the grass. Those were not the responsibilities they were talking about. The ones who had upped the check, paid the money, given the tithe, the ones who had asked for forgiveness, they would have been set there. Then behind them, now we get to the place where the Pam and Pamela, Gaines and Kathy get to see, because then we got the women sitting behind the men. Then behind the women, we then have got the slaves, the servants, the less than would have been sitting behind them. And then with them would have been the children. Unless it was a male son over 10, then he is sitting up front with the men because he's grown now. Grown in church. Don't think. Thank you, lady. Because you get to sit up front, that you've grown. But in the church, they would have been grown. And then sitting behind them would have then been the folk who were afflicted. That's where our story comes. It is the woman who is afflicted, the person who is on the margin, the person who is on the outcast, the person who is not clean, the person who's got some problem in her life, the persons who are dealing and struggling with the people of whom have been pushed down because of their circumstances, the people of whom they view that somehow that because of sin in their lives, because of something they have done wrong, have been pushed to the back. The folk who are the farthest away from Jesus in the story are the folk who have got the deepest need for Jesus. She's in the back. I heard Ed say last night in the story, as we come to the story last night, that the woman walked in and Jesus saw her. No, that's not what happens in the story, and I beg to differ with my good friend. It says that when you're looking in the story, it says that while Jesus was teaching in the synagogue, the woman appeared. Now, mind you, if you would, now, we're in the synagogue, everybody is standing up, and all I can see in the front of the folk and the people that Jesus could see were the men and looking at the thing. And probably Jesus was kind of moving around a little bit, and as he was moving around in his teaching experience, as he was sharing the good news in the midst of the synagogue, that this is the day that the Lord comes in. We're bringing good news to the poor, and we're feeding those who are hungry, giving water to the thirsty. That while he was in the midst of it, and before he got to his food, he got an angle and saw a woman who was in the back, bent over. As long as the folk were standing up, the problems and the ones who needed the story was somehow kept out of sight. Isn't that how we happen and how we do it in our churches today? The very folk that need a Sabbath experience are the ones that we relegate and push to the margins, the folk that we don't even seem to see. Jesus sees her and calls her to come forward. I don't know if anybody in here can imagine that painful walk as she came forward. This woman bent over. Been over for 18 years. Been over. Whose perspective of life had only been to look immediately in front of her. bent over, afflicted. And I want to suggest to you that her affliction was caused by some of the very people she had to walk by. Anybody in here ever had a problem in your life and folk took advantage of your problem and pushed you to the side? Anybody ever struggled with some issues in their lives, came to the church to try and to get some help, and the very people you came to help were the very people that continue to pound on you and put you in your place? Anybody in here? Now, I don't know whether her ailment caused her affliction or her affliction caused her ailment. I like to think it was her ailment made her vulnerable to be afflicted. But it is quite possible that her affliction caused her ailment, because we see in the story that Jesus deals both with the ailment and the affliction. And it could have been, and what made me think about it is because I've been dealing with some folk lately of whom their affliction, their problems have caused them to get sick. Anybody in here understands what I'm talking about? Anybody in here ever been under so much stress in your life and carried so many burdens in your life that it weighed you down, that the burdens got to the place that you came, we went from being bent over to broke. And in your broken spirit, then you became evil. I don't know which it was with this lady, but all I know is that the lady came down, and I am sure that as she came down that aisle that day when Jesus called her in that slow walk, I am sure that there was some folk that as she came down, there were already some folk mad as hell at her. Why in the world did this man call her down? He ought to be able to see this woman can't walk. This woman, oh Lord have mercy. I got to hurry up and get home. The game is on the thing. Oh Lord have mercy. Why didn't he go to the woman? Why does he have the woman? Why does she have to walk down in the front of everybody? Jesus, I believe, waits patiently for the woman. And it says that when you get there, then Jesus says to the woman, you are free from your ailment. Jesus dealt with her health issue. That's why I know that not only did she have an ailment, but she also had an affliction, because when he dealt with her and healed her of her ailment and healed her of her condition, you all understand, we've seen those kind of stories. We remember the woman with the issue of blood. We know people who have been blind and here. Jesus first deals with her ailment, but when he deals with the ailment, she's still been over. Sometimes we look at folk and we think because they are now well, we don't have to deal with them anymore. I can't help but believe and wonder. We've been praying for Pam a lot on the issue of her cancer. Now she comes in, she's got a certificate of completion, but for many of us, we got the same certificate. We can quit praying for her now. We can move on from her now. She's through with that. Her ailment is over with, but we still have to realize that the experience has left her bent over. And it's that Jesus then takes his hand and helps her get up. That's why I don't like Eugene Peterson says that she had arthritis, and when Jesus spoke to her, she popped up. Anybody, that's from a place of privilege. Anybody that has ever experienced somebody who has been bent over, anybody who's ever seen anybody who's carried around burdens for 18 years, you just don't pop up. Jesus took his hand and helped her. If folk won't get out of the affliction, we've got to be willing to put our hands on them. I told you I knew Satan was in church because, and Satan goes to church because as soon as Jesus dealt both with the affliction and the ailment, the leader of the synagogue went crazy. What the hell you doing? It's 6 days. She could be healed. You didn't have to do that today. I'm in control of what happened in the synagogue, and that's not permissible in the synagogue. I used to struggle with wondering why in the world he didn't want it to happen in the synagogue and wanted to happen the other 6 days. And I understand now. You see, is that if the healing had taken place on the other 6 days, had taken place outside of the synagogue, then the synagogue ruler and the folk who were around, in particular those of whom Satan has influence on, could say that Jesus didn't have nothing to do with it. Oh, she got healed because she'd been looking at Dr. Oh, she got healed because she dealt with Dr. Phil. I mean, she looked on, she got healed because she's back on her medication. See, if we allow it to take place out of the synagogue, then we can still say that somehow it ain't real. But when it happens in the midst of and in the presence of, and you know she's set free. But he doesn't want her. I wonder how many people are here today and you can't be set free because we won't let you. How? We want to keep referring to you as the ex-addict. We want to keep talking about you as the ex-hole. We want to keep talking about you as the ex-junkie. We want to keep talking about you as the ex-felon. We want to keep reminding you of when you were bent over. Because somehow that makes us better. You got 6 days. Don't do it in here. And I know in the story they cleaned it up a little bit and Jesus said, you hypocrites, but I know Jesus went some other things and Jesus probably called out some names and stuff because we know Jesus, like from time to time, would call people some names and Jesus said, you hypocrites. You're not concerned about this woman. For you, this woman is nothing. You'll go and make sure your ass got some water.